We're all grateful that your presence has dispelled our confusion. Lakshmi Moniki Jai. Haribo. That was like I said, this was more or less Jai Bala Dave's nudging me to do this. I didn't want to do it at first, but well, we started brainstorming and it became more of a great service. So all glories to Jai Bala Dave for helping me do this service as well. So, anyways, that was it. Hare Krishna.
Gopi Jana Vallabha Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Yashodanandana Brajajana Ranjana Yashodanandana Brajajana Ranjana Yamunatira Vanachari Yamunatira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Yashodanandana Brajajana Ranjana Yashodanandana Brajajana Ranjana Yamunatira Vanachari Yamunatira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jai Om Vishnu Pad Paramahamsa Parivrajacharya Uttara Shri Srimad His Divine Grace A. C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Grantara Srimad Bhagvatam Ki Samaveta Bhaktavinda Nitai Gaur Premanand. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Sri Sri Guru and Sri Gauranga. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Continue readings from Grantaraj Srimad Bhagvatam, 6th Canto, Chapter 16, Text 8. Evam yoni gato jiva sa nityo nirahankrita yavad yatro palabhyeta tavat svatvam hitasyata. Evam yoni gata jiva sa nityo nirahankrita yavad yatra palobhyeta tavat svatvam hitasyata. Evam yoni gata jiva sa nityo nirahankrita yavad yatro palabhyeta tavat svatvam hitasyata. Evam, thus, yonigata, being within a specific species of life, jiva, the living entity, saha, he, nitya, eternal, nirahankrita, without identification with the body, yavat, as long as, yatra, where, palabhyeta, he may be found, tavat, that long, svatvam, the concept of self. He, indeed. Tasya, of him. Tat, that. Translation purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Translation. Even though one living entity becomes connected with another because of a relationship based on bodies that are perishable, the living entity is eternal. Actually, it is not the body that is born or lost. Actually, it is the body that is born or lost, not the living entity. One should not accept that the living entity takes birth or dies. The living being actually has no relationship with so-called fathers and mothers. As long as he appears as the son of a certain father and mother as a result of his past fruitive activities, he has a connection with the body given by that father and mother. Thus, he falsely accepts himself as their son and acts affectionately. After he dies, however, the relationship is finished. Under these circumstances, one should not be falsely involved with jubilation and lamentation. Purport. When the living entity lives within the material body, he falsely thinks that he is the body, although actually he is not. His relationship with his body and his so-called father and mother are false, illusory conceptions. These illusions continue as long as one is not enlightened about the situation of the living entity. And we're also going to do one more text. This is text 9. Translation. The living entity is eternal and imperishable because he actually has no beginning and no end. He never takes birth or dies. He is the basic principle of all types of bodies, yet he does not belong to the bodily category. The living being is so sublime that he is equal in quality to the Supreme Lord. Nonetheless, because he is extremely small, he is prone to be illusioned by the external energy, and thus he creates various bodies for himself according to his different desires. Purport. In this verse, the philosophy of Achintya Bheda, simultaneous oneness and difference, is described. The living entity is eternal, nitya, like the Supreme Personality of Godhead, but the difference is that the Supreme Lord is the greatest, no one being equal to or greater than him, whereas the living entity is shukshma, or extremely small. The Shastra describes that the magnitude of the living entity is 1/10,000th the size, the tip of a hair. The Supreme Lord is all-pervading. Andatarasta paramanyo chayantarashtam. Relatively, if the living entity is accepted as the smallest, there should naturally be inquiry about the greatest. The greatest is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and the smallest is the living entity. Another peculiar characteristic of the jiva is that he becomes covered by maya. Atma maya gunai. He is prone to being covered by the Supreme Lord's illusory energy. The living entity is responsible for his conditional life in the material world, and therefore he is described as Prabhu, the Master. If he likes, he can come to this material world, and if he likes, he can return home, back to Godhead. Because he wanted to enjoy this material world, the Supreme Personality of Godhead gave him a material body through the agency of the material energy. As the Lord himself says in Bhagavad Gita 1861, Ishvara sarva bhutanam pradeshir junatishtati pramayan sarva bhutani yantaruddhani mayaya. The Supreme Lord is situated in everyone's heart, O Arjuna, and is directing the wanderings of all living entities, who are seated as on a machine made of the material energy. The Supreme Lord gives the living entity a chance to enjoy in this material world as he desires, but he openly expresses his own desire that the living entity should give up all material aspirations, fully surrender unto him, and return home back to Godhead. The living entity is the smallest, Shukshma. Jiva Goswami says in this connection that the living entity within the body is extremely difficult for materialistic scientists to find, although we understand from authorities that the living entity is within the body. The body is different from the living entity. Om Jnana Timirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Svapadantikam Vancha kalpatarubhyascha kripasindubhya eva cha patitanan pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaura Bhaktavrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, everyone. Thank you for being here. Thank you very much again, Mother Lakshmimoni, for your time with us, and ask for your blessings that we can discuss a little Bhagavatam before you go, I guess. So, we are continuing this series of verses that's trying to get us to really understand the depth, the gravity of this point. Bodily identification, family relationships is such a cause of suffering for the living entity. And I was thinking how it's actually ironic because in the material conception of life, one of the greatest, most happy enlightened is birth and family relationships. According to our philosophy, though, we take a little different look on it, as Prabhupada's explaining here, that actually birth is the cause of suffering, and parents who should be respected sometimes pose as obstacles in one's spiritual life. Generally, the parents have the duty for proper well-being of the child. They're to give the most love and affection so that that child can find his own best interest. But in Kali Yuga, the circumstances that we find ourselves, often those who have that position to be our best well-wishers sometimes pose as a different position where we can find an obstacle in our own pursuit. And by this bodily identification, that can serve as an obstacle in our own self-interest. So the purport here, Prabhupada is just reminding us the importance of these points so that we can pursue our own best interest. We cannot be, so that we won't be hindered by obstacles in the proper discharge of our duty, which is to become fully Krishna conscious. We were mentioning previously that actually no one should become a parent or a guru or even a relative if they can't deliver their dependents from the cycle of birth and death. So we should understand actually the proper function of family and parents and things, and be careful to analyze whether they are able to really assist us in our spiritual life, because sometimes culturally that respect is there, and the devotees need to be sure that they're acting in that relationship to enhance their own Krishna consciousness and the Krishna consciousness of others. We also see that point in the Western world where perhaps the relationships are not so strong, but the same principle is being enacted actually, that on family identification relationships, one wants to make sure that they're being properly guided by a spiritual authority, spiritual parents. The next point that's being mentioned here is these material miseries that the living entity has to undergo. They're simply superfluous to his nature. As a spirit soul, Prabhupada liked this verse, Anarto pasanam sakshat, yoga madhoksaje, lokasya janito vidvams chakre satvata samhitam. That actually the material miseries of the living entity are superfluous to him. These can be directly mitigated by this linking process of bhakti yoga. But the mass of people do not know this. Therefore, the learned Vyasadeva compiled this Vedic literature, which is in relation to the absolute truth. So, unfortunately, our whole material existence is actually an unnecessary burden. And Prabhupada's indicating what's the cause of that. It's actually our own desire. So this sense of responsibility comes in. Oftentimes, people who are unaware of the science of God try to even blame Krishna for this situation. And sometimes subtly ourselves also, if we're put in different circumstances that we find unfavorable, we notice there may be some negative feelings going on, right? I thought Krishna was all loving and all kind. Why am I finding myself in these difficult situations? So taking ownership of why we are here is essential to see how Krishna is really working in our best interest, and he wants the best for us. Until we really accept that I came here out of my own foolishness, out of my own accord, the prospect of surrender remains very distant, because we're not so inclined to, we can't surrender to someone we don't have faith or trust in. So if we don't see that actually Krishna is working to bring us out of this situation, that we ourselves put ourselves in this own position, then we'll be more inclined to accept Sarva Dharma Parityagya, I should surrender to Krishna. And this also implies the next point mentioned, how the jiva is actually very insignificant. Krishna is the greatest of the greatest, and Prabhupada says, so then what's the smallest of the smallest? That's the jiva. And this is a point that philosophically, intellectually, we like to grasp. But until it becomes more of an assimilation, in other words, it starts affecting the way we act, we're not going to be able to make much spiritual progress. The insignificance, you can imagine if there's a particle of dust, floating through this room right now, and that particle dust is saying, I'm so important, get out of my way. I need to go through here, and excuse me, I'm coming through. It's funny, right? It's a joke. And the soul is even smaller than that. You can't even see with a microscope. So to have that as a constant reminder actually becomes an obstacle. If I'm identified with my body, I'm this huge person. I have so many important things I have to do, and you're in my way. So this can actually cause a lot of strain in relationships and in the ashram. Sometimes we see this where, due to a lack of appreciation of this point, so many conflicts can arise, so many obstacles, and that actually can be a very difficult tribulation for one's spiritual progress. I want to share one point in this regard. This is from a book by His Holiness Bhakti Tirtha Swami. It talks about avoiding aparad, because this is something that we face on a daily basis. That we're associating with Vaishnavas, we become familiar, we forget the kind of critical nature of these things, and very subtly, if we're not attentive to it, it acts as a block. We're coming here before the deities. God is personally present, but what are we experiencing? And if we're not experiencing what the potential is, it's due to this offensive, is subtle. Our consciousness is not proper. So he shares some really enlightening points here that I just wanted to share. Something we can be aware of, especially in the temple atmosphere for many of us, or wherever we're associating with devotees. He explains this is Maya's espionage. Maya enters into environment as devotion. She seeks out those who are the carriers of devotion and influences them to become enemies or to attack each other. Anyone can criticize, but how much do we step forward to help? How much do we try to set the example of Krishna consciousness? The main point he's bringing out is that aparad really means Radha Shunda, devoid of Radha's loving mercy and protection. So he continues some of Maya's tactics. What can easily happen is that Maya will play an interesting trick. She inspires those who are trying to leave her sphere of influence to start fighting, so that gradually they fall back into her grips. Parties will begin to lose some of their spiritual strength, their spiritual credits. It is so typical of fighting. Someone may, quote, win the fight, but both individuals have dirty clothes, black eyes, torn dresses, torn shirts, or torn pants. Someone may say, well, I really beat him up. Yes, but look at you. You've got a black eye, your clothes are all torn, and you wasted so much energy and time. You should have been doing something else. This is what makes Maya very happy. She thinks these entities would normally be combating my influence and bringing others out of my grip, but now they are distracted by fighting and varieties of anxiety. So we see this in our own lives, and sometimes in the atmosphere we may find ourselves to. This is how Maya is trying to influence us, right? By not coming to that position of the humility of the soul. These little frictions that go on, it's really damaging. If we're not attentive to that, devotees begin to look somewhere else actually for satisfaction. I can't get along nicely with the devotees, so my old relationships start looking more attractive. So the first step is really this identification that this is one of the challenges that we're facing, and bringing consciousness in each and every interaction. Also mentioned here is these 6 different types of Vaishnav aparad. So simply by not being happy and seeing another Vaishnav, that's actually an offense. So he goes on to say that out of billions of living entities, here are a few that have actually accepted Krishna as the Supreme Personality of Godhead and are very strongly engaged in his devotional service. So to not be happy upon seeing such an individual, this is indicative of an offensive mentality. And that becomes an issue also in close context. To become angry with a Vaishnava, someone does something to us, a natural response, we just become angry. That's natural, right? What's the problem? But again, such very special living entities, animosity towards them in whatever form, this is checking our spiritual advancement. This is blocking us from accessing actually the holy name, because we know this is an offense to the holy name, how closely related these two are. So I think I was just appreciating how there's a lot of relevancy and how our spiritual position actually relates. It comes out in our interactions, right? We get tested or we get some feedback or something. That's really when the test comes. How much are we feeling our true position? How much are we identifying as a soul? How much are we identifying with the coverings of the soul? So it's in Chaitanya Charitamrita that this verse, Trinadapi Sunichena Tadore Vasahishnuna Amanina Manadena Kirtaniya Stahari, that we should wear this around our neck for constant remembrance. And if we try to do that, then when those situations come up, when that rub with the devotee comes, that's the idea. We're constantly remembering it. So even though I know it doesn't feel good, if we try to take that humble position, okay, just then we'll start to feel the mercy. Then we'll be able to chant with more. Will come in our chanting and our relationships, all these things, and it just begins with an endeavor, right? We're not there totally yet, but by seeing that endeavor, whatever small endeavors we make, Krishna will empower us more and more. Krishna, you're trying, so here's the next opportunity. But if we take shelter of, we were having this really nice discussion of choosing the higher road or the lower road. So if we make that investment, even though it's difficult to choose that higher principle, then we'll get more and more opportunities to do so. But if we kind of recline to the safety or our conditioning, it's easier, then we lose those opportunities. And Krishna consciousness is nothing but a amazing opportunity. So this is also why we chant japa in the morning. In the morning is the time when we're really praying for the mercy. We're supposed to be really begging. We have to access this mood. Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj also wrote some books called The Beggar. So it's about begging for the mercy. That's really what it comes down to. So in the morning is the ideal opportunity. I have to go through this day. There's going to be so many variety of situations, interactions, and all these things. How am I going to deal with it? So let me just call out. This is why japa's in the morning. It's not right before bed. Then I call out and I take rest. So they're very logical. And this is why I also had said that kirtan, the loud congregational chanting of holy names, this is the safe zone, right? Throughout the rest of the day, so many different things are going, but if you want to be safe, you can join the Harinam Kirtan. Because then you're simply absorbed in connecting with Krishna in a very intimate way through his holy name. So I just appreciate that point. It's in my mind that that's the safe place, if we are getting some realizations, then we have to be sure that we don't become proud of those. That we don't, thank you so much, Hare Krishna. That we don't become proud of any realizations we may get, because a realization is nothing but Krishna disclosing himself more to us. So let's say I ask, Micah where he's from. He says, I'm from New Jersey. So then, okay, I have some information about Michael. He's from New Jersey. Now, if I become proud, hey, I know where he's from. You guys don't even know where he's from. I'm becoming proud because he disclosed something to me. Is that very rational? Does that make sense? No, that doesn't make sense. That was his mercy that he disclosed that to me. And so now I'm trying to take credit. Wow, I'm so knowledgeable. I know where all these devotees are from. No, so Krishna is a person. Any realizations we get, it's Krishna's personally disclosing himself to us. So what do we have to be proud of? And we can understand also that the unfortunate situation that we did come to this material world. And what do we come here to do? To do nonsense. We're simply just loitering in this material world. We're just simply engaged in so many nonsense, rascal activities, actually. And that's born out of our envy. It's actually a manifestation envy of why the living entities are even in this material jagat. And what are they doing? If you look outside, what do they do? They're just bustling here and there, looking for some adoration or some fame or some sense gratification, some type of independent enjoyment they're trying to secure. And this also comes up as devotees too. Our envy to Krishna manifests. We try to be the controller and the enjoyer of spiritual activity. That's also this subtle form of envy. So also this surrender is being mentioned here by Prabhupada, that the living entity is trying to find his own enjoyment. He forgets that the real enjoyment just comes by full surrender to Krishna. And the reason that there's a difficulty in that is because of this, again, bodily identification. If I'm so much identified with my body or my family, my parents, I can't surrender because what would my parents think? This is such an unfortunate type of mentality that we go through, because as we mentioned, the parents are supposed to be the ones encouraging us to go back to Godhead. The parents are, I can't surrender because of my family. Then we should understand that bodily consciousness is a severe obstacle. It needs to be that needs to be shaken off to see the reality, the higher facts. That we're souls simply due to past activity. I've appeared in this material world with some other living entities. Actually, we have nothing to do with each other. We just are here to try to cultivate God consciousness. So that's the primary purpose of my life. That's where I need to focus. Those who are assisting me in that, that's my real friends and family. And those who are preventing that, then I wish them the best. Maybe I can render them some service, but I don't value so much those who are, trying to discourage me in my practice of Krishna consciousness. And also, we have to develop this pessimistic view of material existence. Material existence, as we mentioned, we've just come here foolishly to try to imitate Krishna. It's such an unnecessary burden. It's so we have to see how material life is miserable. It's complete suffering from beginning to end, actually. And we sometimes become comfortable as a devotees. I'm in the temple, things are going good, I got a few doties, something. But we forget, no, material life as a principle is suffering, it's misery. Inside the temple or outside the temple, it doesn't matter. That we have to see that aspect of it. Otherwise, we remain just complacent. Oh, it's okay. Everything's okay. It's good. The devotee's thinking, I have to get out of this as soon as possible. How dangerous, how much of a precarious position I'm in. If I make one mistake or one aparad, I could be out of here. So let me just go back to Godhead as soon as I can. I don't want to waste any more time, waste any other opportunities. Kali Yuga is only getting worse. It's understand our precarious situation. The final point mentioned in the purport is that the material scientists, they're baffled in finding the presence of the soul. So really that's not so surprising, because their methods, their whole techniques are born out of envy. On my own, let me achieve knowledge, right? Anyabhilashita shunyam jnana karmadinavritam. Pure devotional service means no desire for knowledge. The scientists, their whole purpose is let us just receive knowledge for ourselves. So naturally, Krishna and the jiva are spiritual entities. So how could they be perceived by material means? It's very unlikely. And the real reason that they can't find the soul is because they're unsubmissive. They're not accepting anyone superior to them in a spiritual position. So they'll remain baffled until the end of time. Only when Krishna, out of his own will and mercy, begins to disclose himself, only at that point will they be able to approach understanding these spiritual matters. So those were a few reflections on this nice series of verses here. They are very similar to the ones we've been covering, so that's why I read 2 verses, but ever helpful to remind and meditate upon. Thank you all very much. Hare Krishna. Maybe if there's any questions or anything we can take. Yes.
In the purport, it said we're called Prabhu because we're responsible for
You're
the Maya.
You're the master.
And the master of Maya conditioning. I was wondering if you can just expand on
Well,
that.
the point was he's called master because he, in one sense, he controls his destiny. Because he's the master of his body. He's he's the master of his own body, and he has free will. So in one sense, he's a master. But honestly, it's kind of like a sarcastic master. He's not really the master. He's a jiva. He's insignificant. So he's master of his body. He has free will, but he has to surrender to fully optimize that free will, to fully get the benefit of his spiritual existence. The master has to surrender. If you look at any very powerful person, he also has a master. Everyone except Krishna, because he's the supreme personality of Godhead. Everyone else is a servant. Even a great master, spiritual masters or in the material world, they are a servant first. Before you can excel in something, you have to learn from someone. So the jiva has to actually surrender to the real master to achieve the success of spiritual life. So he's a Prabhu, he's a master in one sense, but not in another sense. And this is a good way of respecting others, actually. We say Prabhu, 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 but we don't think, what does Prabhu mean, Prabhu, we're saying more like Das, Das. We should call everyone Das. You're my servant. We're saying Prabhu. So Prabhu means you're my master. Let me serve you. That keeps us in the consciousness of appreciating, valuing devotees. Is that okay? Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Yes.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Nice class. All I just have is a sutra in this regard that I heard a while ago. The most powerful things that impact my consciousness is when I hear, brief sutras or some poetry in Krishna consciousness. Something I heard a while ago. It has to do with, like you mentioned, about how we suffer from identifying with our family members, and if they don't like Krishna consciousness, then we're so attached and we don't like it. We ultimately. But have you heard this phrase, like blood is thicker than water? Do you know what that means?
I've heard of it. I can grasp the meaning, I think.
Yes,
but if you want,
something
you can
like
explain
family's
it.
relationship is better than any friend's relationship. Family is the essence of our life. So there's a saying I heard a while ago, something to the extent, they say blood is thicker than water, but love is thicker than nationality, creed, or color. And so we could see this as exemplary in all the saints' life, including Srila Prabhupada's, that people left their family, their religions, et cetera, from basically the love that Srila Prabhupada gave them. It wasn't just like any ordinary love, it was God's love. He acted as an instrument of God's love. So these sutras are very powerful to me. I can't absorb a lot, but these have the most impact on my consciousness. So
That's a nice point, because love, let's just say, here's a statement, love makes us crazy. Now, in the material world, love makes us crazy to do all sorts of stupid things because we're blinded by that. Material love, you do something totally ridiculous. Later on, you'll think, why the heck did I do that? That was totally an illusion. So that's love is crazy in a bad way. But in the spiritual sense, love makes you do all sorts of crazy things for the pleasure of the beloved. So if it's Krishna or his devotees, you'll do so many miraculous, amazing things that are they're crazy. They're beyond the material, rational mind, but they act as a benefit. They act to advance us. It helps pull us beyond our limitations, beyond our conditions, our everyday life. That's how this whole movement took off, because they were crazy for Prabhupada. And because of that, they went back to Godhead. So I was just thinking of that point in regards to what you mentioned. Thank you, Prabhu. Anyone else like to share any thoughts on this? We can have a little discussion. People can chip in if they like.
Hare Krishna, thank you very much for your class. I was thinking there is a nice point in Nectar of Devotion that regarding how you ignore, how to go above the worldly conception in connection to these verses. Thing is that there is a nice example how that he used that Durvasa Muni. Durvasa, he caused that he is in Ambrish Maharaj. That time Ambrish Maharaj was his bodily changes happened, and his tears was coming, but he could not express anything because that there in Nectar of Devotion it is stated there is a certain point that is called samadhi. Samadhi means when you go beyond this worldly conception. And there is in Srila Rupa Goswami has mentioned that's called one of the characteristic of devotee is that is called perseverance.
Perseverance.
Yes, perseverance means that is the point. So how you can pass over this situation? Somebody is offending you, somebody is criticizing you, somebody did some offense. But how to bear that, tolerate, and go beyond of that point? That is, if you cannot express your anger, if you just simply tolerate, okay, and that place is that situation of mind is called samadhi. Very, very intricacy is there. At that point, you have to understand. In Nectar of Devotion, it is explained nicely.
Thank you. Yeah, that samadhi is absorption in Krishna.
Right.
That you can't actually operate on the soul platform if you're not engaged in devotional service.
Right.
So that the power of attraction between the soul and Krishna is what allows us to tolerate those things. Someone rubs us the wrong way. Unless we're fixed on Krishna and service to Krishna, it's going to agitate us. So that's a very nice point to that. That's the key.
And also, before coming to that stage, and it is explained there also, it is not like mechanical way you cannot control, your mind. But thing is, it's extraordinary mercy of required, for Krishna's mercy. But to achieve that situation, that stage, you must be free from material contamination. That's the first stage. Unless you are free from material contamination, you cannot achieve that pure love of Krishna.
Yeah.
Then all tolerance, power, everything.
Yeah. Free from hankering, lamenting, attachment, and aversion. All those things, they help more firmly situate us in duality. Oh, I really like this and this. So many times we're just so absorbed in something that we forget that that's actually covering the soul, if it's not something related to Krishna. Because it's absorbing us more in the bodily concept and the dualities, and just like, oh, I hate that. No, get that. Stay on that. But this is all the bodily consciousness. So the soul is learning how to become neutral to these pushings and pullings of the senses and the mind. Thank you, Prabhu. Something else. Jagatananda Prabhu.
Haripul. Sorry, I came late. Maybe this point was already covered. Here in the purport, Prabhupada writes, he's explaining why the living entity is described as Prabhu. And then he says, if he likes, he can come to this material world. And if he likes, he can return home back to Godhead. But then earlier we were also hearing that the living entity is not completely independent.
Yeah.
He is dependent. So could you explain that sentence? Is it just his liking that he can go back home, back to Godhead?
Is it just his what?
Yeah.
What was the last point? Is it just his...
Is it just his liking that he wants to go back home to Godhead and then that's it? 1, 2, 3? Or if it was so easy, then...
to be... Actually, Prabhu, in one sense it is, because that's what Prabhupada has said, that actually you can go back to Godhead in an instant. So is it just liking? That is the main component. Now, how much do we want it? That's the question. Anyone can say, I want it. That'd be cool. Going back to Godhead sounds cool. But really wanting, if you really want it, then if you make the effort, this is the famous Damodar pastime. If you really want it, that means you're going to act 24 hours a day as a sole purpose in life. And when one does that, properly following the sadhana bhakti formula, or the formula of devotion that's been given by the acharyas, then Krishna's mercy, Krishna will be pleased upon that individual. He's so sincere. He's so desire. He's so strong in his determination. So we see like Dhruva Maharaj. That's an example that just by determination, actually, it can happen like that. But our problem is that we don't have that determination. We don't have that desire. Our desire is somewhere in there, but there's a lot of mist and smoke around it that we can't really make it out all the time. It gets covered. Today I really want, the next day, So that's why there's that stagnation. And we did mention that point about the Prabhu, that in one sense the the jiva being called Prabhu is a little bit of it's a little sarcastic in one sense, because he's so insignificant, but he is the master of his body. So in that sense, he's a master. But compared to Krishna, Krishna is the supreme master. Everyone is his servant. So.
Yeah, and Prabhupada also, and in the translation and the purport, he describes the qualitative oneness, but the quantitative difference.
Yeah.
So, he begins with Achintya Bheda Bheda Tattva. So, in that sense, he's as good as the Lord.
Yeah.
He's spiritual in nature, so he's called Prabhu. Yeah.
Thank you for that point, because also a lot of times we impose a lot of limitations on ourselves because of forgetting that the jiva, he's actually in quality the same as Krishna. He's as good as Krishna. So Krishna can do anything. The spirit soul is of the same quality. But we impose our own restrictions. I can't do that. I'm like this, or I have this deficiency. So these things can sometimes cover us that actually the soul is incredible. That's what Krishna says in the Bible. The soul is incredible. He's never born. He never dies. This tiny thing smaller than the atom is eternal and is giving energy to the entire body. And it's all pervading. So this point of qualitative oneness, this opens up our minds. Wow, if I say I can't do something, who am I thinking is the I? Can the soul not do that, or am I identifying with my body or mind? So yeah, thank you. I also like that point.
Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, we have to. So coming back, so you're saying that it's just not a matter of, so our liking has to come out in expression. It has to come out.
Yeah.
That we have to show our desire to Krishna, that I want to come back to you. It's not just a wishful thinking.
Yeah.
But we show it in action.
Thank you.
And then Krishna, as Prabhupada writes later, he's expressing his desire that the living entity come back to him. So he's more than eager, but we show our eagerness in thinking, feeling, and willing, all three, not just one of them.
Can I comment on that also? Because that's also a nice point. This is one of the significance of the cleaning of the Gundicha temple, where it's explained that one's desire to go back to God, it is shown by how much one engages in meticulously cleaning our heart. To the degree that we really take up the process of purifying our consciousness, that shows Krishna how desirous we are of going back to Godhead. So that's a powerful statement, and therefore all that cleaning was to show how eager the devotees are. And they were collecting their dust. This, for those of you that may not, this was when Lord Chaitanya's followers were cleaning the Gundicha temple in Puri. And they were all collecting little piles of dust, But when Lord Chaitanya collected his pile, it was bigger than all the others put together. And the commentary is explaining how this is showing our desire. How eager am I to really cleanse myself from all the impurities, the little tinges of selfishness and lust and envy. Am I content just to leave them there? That's okay, I can just save that there for later. Or do I want to really target all of these areas in my spiritual life and really address these anarthas? Yeah.
One more, just to emphasize your point that we're making, that we have to be firmly, rooted in the spiritual conception. That means we are not the body, we're the spirit soul. But then what are the qualities of the soul, as you're saying? Sachidananda. So all these things that we're talking about, they're all designations, gross or subtle. I'm smart or I'm stupid or I'm lazy. This is not who we are. We are not the body, and we are not the gross, subtle body either. These identifications. And so, in that sense, that's as you're saying, that's true self-esteem, self-respect, which is so much lacking in this world. And we try to adjust the shadow, and we still, don't get to our goal. But so we have to take off all these labels. And we did some exercises like this, where we would, plaster these labels on our backs. What are the labels that run our life? And then just putting all of those labels sort of like a ritual, putting them in a fire sacrifice.
Wow.
So that exercise, it brings it out of from the subconscious to the conscious, and anyway.
That sounds like
so
a
I'm
great
just
exercise.
emphasizing your point about strongly identifying with the spiritual conception. Thank you.
Thank you. Did anyone say maybe one more? Yes, please.
Hare Krishna Prabhu. Just about the point of, liking, like the sentence in the purport, and what you said that, in one sense, if we like to go back to Godhead, it happens because it shows up in our life day and night. And I was just thinking for myself, just sharing an observation that when we come into Krishna consciousness, in the beginning it's so simple actually, because we do feel like, wow, this is wonderful and all the devotees are really amazing, and so that heart is so wide open and we are filled with gratitude. And but then after some time, at least my own experience, over many years, there is we almost, the familiarity comes in, and even within the devotee relationships, we almost start doing the same program that we did before when we were in our, in the life before we came to spiritual life. There are so many detours inside inside a circle of devotees that we could take that can completely, take us in a totally different direction, and we are working in that direction for years until Krishna, we get a little. So, I was just thinking alertness. We like it, and the sense of alertness that the consciousness of a beginner all the time. I think that really helps also, because otherwise all these designations come up and we get. Maya can get us anywhere really.
Thank you so much.
Thank
That
you.
reminds me one point also I was wanting to mention, that Sadhu Sangha is continually glorified. It's all that devotional progress is based on your association of the sadhu, even a moment. So Sadhu Sangha is mentioned so valuable. Now, why is that? Now, one thought I was having is how, and it helps address this issue, is that when you associate with more senior devotees, then we get put back in a position like that, because the devotees ultimately share their mercy with us. And how does that come? It comes by humbling us, because they have the greater experience, they have the greater vision, the greater knowledge. So by associating with sadhus, the sadhu means heavy or cut. So the more we associate with more senior devotees, then the more we see how insignificant, how limited I am. I'm not so great actually that I thought I was. And then that helps bring us back down, So that's why it's a little difficult. We may not feel so inclined. I don't want to associate with that person because they're going to tell me everything I'm doing wrong. But really, that's their mercy. And if we begin to see like that this is actually the nectar, and we crave that nectar. That's what Prabhupada once said. You can tell advanced disciple is one who's always eager to be chastised by his spiritual master. So seeing how that helps bring us back down, kind of deflates our bubble. I've also just wanted to share personally that that's how I'm seeing the value of sadhu sangha in that particular way that they have a tendency to do that for us. So, but that is a difficulty we face, the familiarity, and we should all be thinking of ways to eliminate that. So thank you. Okay, I think we'll stop there for today. Thank you all very, very much. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Grantara Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai.